To pass is another one. A lot of times you have that habit. It's a really difficult habit to break. You can't break it in 2 or 3 days. You have to continue to practice and replace it with a different habit. Well, the way you think right now is a habit that you've been training yourself to do for some of you 20, 21, 22, 23 years. So I realized I wasn't going to just change those habits overnight. They were deeply ingrained. But the good news is they were just habits. And I knew if it was a habit, I could replace it with a better habit. Just like I could replace going off 1 foot with stopping under control on 2 feet. And so I can honestly say that once I realized that I needed to start taking responsibility for where I was putting my attention and that no one else was going to do it for me, I can honestly say that for the next 2.5 years, I worked harder and was more disciplined about retraining the way I thought, specifically about myself as a basketball player, than I had ever been on working on any of my physical skills. And I was always a very hard worker. I was always the hardest worker on every team I played on. I practiced a lot. But I can honestly say that I had to work harder on changing the way I thought than I ever had on any of my physical skills. And so a couple of the things that I did when I came home that summer was, once I figured that out, was I came back to my hometown that summer, and at night I would go play pickup games at my high school with a bunch of local guys that lived in my town. And I'd play for 2 or 3 hours, and when I would come home, I would make myself, for that whole summer, I would make myself write down 10 good things that I did in the gym that night. And I can tell you, at that point in my career, it was dang near impossible for me to come up with 10 things when I first started doing it. I would go to the gym and I'd play pickup for 2 or 3 hours straight, and I'd come home and I'd get out that piece of notebook paper and I'd start to make my list, and I'd get about 2 or 3 things on my list, and I would just get stuck. And I would say, man, that's it. I didn't do anything else good tonight. I was terrible. But I would make myself come up with something, anything. And at first, I was reaching for straws. At first, I was writing down things like, my shoes didn't come untied one time tonight. That was a good thing. That's positive. Or my shorts were really matching my shirt tonight. That's a good thing. I'd write that down. Anything. I didn't get into an accident in my car on the way home from the gym tonight. Anything. Anything that was positive, I would make myself put it on that list. And what started to happen was, because I very diligently made myself do that, by about the 4th or 5th time when I sat down to make that list, I was getting tired of writing about my shoelaces and my outfits and my car. I wanted to write about basketball stuff. So I would go to the gym, and when I walked in the door, I was already thinking about that list, thinking, I got that stupid list I got to do tonight. I'm going to pay attention because I don't want to write about my shoelaces tonight. I want to write about stuff that happens in here. So I would pay attention. So maybe at some point in the game, I'd make a decent pass. So I'd say to myself, okay, got to remember that pass, got to remember that pass. And maybe a few minutes later, I'd hit a shot. I might hit a layup. So I think, okay, got to remember that layup. Good shot, good layup. Good shot, good layup. Because I wanted to try to remember 10 things. And so as soon as I got home, as quick as I could, I'd get out that sheet so I wouldn't forget those things. And it was still hard. I was still having to make stuff up. But what I noticed was after a few days, the list started getting easier and easier. And it wasn't because I was playing better. It wasn't because I was doing more good things, at least not at first. But what was happening was where I was putting my attention had started to change a little bit, because I knew I had to make the stupid list. So I knew I had to try to remember some good stuff that happened. And then what started to happen is, as I started to put my attention on those things when I was in the gym, more of those things did start to happen. Energy flows where attention goes. And so the list got easier and easier. And so that was a big step for me in starting to retrain the way I thought, my habits of thought, and where I was placing my attention. I'll preface all this by saying I don't have a degree in psychology. I don't have any formal training in psychology, but this is what I know about confidence. This is what I learned about confidence. And I think that confidence comes from 2 things, and 2 things only. I think that the first place that confidence comes from is your preparation. Your preparation. You know, there's no substitute for the feeling of confidence that you get from knowing that you've done the work, from knowing that you've put in the time. And a big part of confidence just comes from good old-fashioned skill. I mean, the more proficient you are at something, the more competent you are at something, the more competent you are at something, the more confidence you will have in it. And you don't get those kinds of skills without putting in the work, without getting in the gym and doing the time. And a lot of times younger players especially will come up to me and say things like, you know, Coach D, I don't know what's wrong, but I just don't have any confidence in my shot. If I just had more confidence in my shot, I know I could hit more of them. And I ask a few more questions of them, and I ask them, you know, how much are you shooting? Are you counting your shots? Are you recording your improvement? Do you have a regular shooting routine that you do every day? And come to find out, well, no, not really. I kind of just shoot around. Well, that's not a lack of confidence issue. That's a lack of preparation issue. So the first thing that I think you should kind of do a self-check on with yourself is if you're someone who struggles with confidence, ask yourself, is this really a lack of confidence issue, or is this a lack of preparation issue? I mean, it would almost be as if I said something ridiculous like, I just don't know what's wrong with me these days, but I just have no confidence performing brain surgery on someone. Well, I shouldn't be confident performing brain surgery. You should hope that I'm not very confident performing brain surgery, because I've never been to medical school. I don't even like to see blood. It makes me faint. So I shouldn't have any confidence performing brain surgery. Well, the same thing is true with shooting, for example. If you don't practice your shooting regularly and consistently, then you shouldn't feel confident in your shot. And your coach probably doesn't want you to feel confident in your shot, because you probably don't have a high level of skill with your shooting. So the first place that confidence comes from is your preparation. To me, this whole notion of mental toughness, I mean, that's a phrase you hear coaches talk about all the time. To me, this whole notion of mental toughness has to do with what you choose to focus on. Mental toughness or mental strength is just about what you choose to focus on. Players and people that aren't very mentally tough tend to put their focus on what I call petty problems. Petty problems. Like, it's too hot in here. There's no AC in the gym. The ball doesn't have enough air in it. The floor's too slippery. They tend to put their focus and their attention on these petty problems. But players and people that are mentally tough tend to be much more noble-minded. Noble-minded. They put their focus and their attention on things that really matter, things that really go into winning a championship or being a special player on a championship team. To be noble-minded means to put your attention on things like your attitude, your approach, your effort level, what you choose to say to teammates, your tone of voice. That's what being noble-minded is about. And players that are mentally tough pride themselves in being mentally prepared for any circumstance, for any situation. They don't complain about petty problems. As a matter of fact, they welcome petty problems. They go into a game and they say, it's hot in here? Excellent. Balls doesn't have enough air in it? Great. We got bad referees tonight? Terrific. Because in their mind, those are the kind of petty problems that their opponent is going to get caught up in. They're going to get distracted by, that their opponent's going to use as an excuse for why they couldn't do their best that night. But when you're mentally tough, you're prepared to do your best no matter what the circumstances are. It doesn't matter if the ball's flat or it's hot or there's no AC in the gym. Players that are mentally tough are much more noble-minded. The conditions don't distract them. So how do you know if you have mental toughness? Well, what happens in a game when a referee makes a call that you think is a bad call? Do you complain? Do you get all frustrated? Or do you pride yourself in not accepting any gifts from a referee? What happens when somebody talks trash to you? Do you lose your focus and get all caught up in that and get all hot and bothered by that? Or do you get even more focused and just kind of smile and walk away and get even more determined the next time? Here's another big one. What about when coach is yelling at you for something that's not your fault? What's your approach then? Do you pout, feel sorry for yourself, get angry at your coach? Or do you look him in the eye and listen to what he's saying and try to find something positive in what he's saying to you, whether it was your fault or not? Who cares if it was your fault? So mental toughness is where you put your attention. Do you focus on petty problems, or are you more noble-minded? Martin Luther King Jr. said one time that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. So take pride in what we call at Point Guard College your unruffleability. And I think Coach Mano is going to talk more about that a little bit later in the week. But take pride in your nobility of mind. Take pride in your ability to routinely rise above petty problems. You can't afford to major in minor things if you want to be the leader of a championship team. You can't afford to focus on petty problems if you want to play on a team that wins championships. And when you become mentally tough and you learn to choose your attitude moment to moment, it will give you a huge advantage in basketball and in life, because most people aren't like that. Most of your opponents are going to get caught up in petty problems. So when you learn to be more mentally tough and have that nobility of mind, it gives you a huge advantage in life. It puts you on a whole different playing field. One of the big things that I learned from these confident and successful athletes is where they were putting their attention was very different from where I was putting my attention on a daily basis. What you do with your attention will determine the quality of your life. What you do with your attention will determine the quality of your basketball career. What you do with your attention will determine how confident you are or how confident you aren't. And there's a saying that says energy flows where attention goes. Wherever you choose, it's another time you could circle that word choose, wherever you choose to put your attention, you're going to get more of that. So for someone like me, my sophomore year, where all my attention was going on shots that I missed, how my shot felt when it wasn't feeling good when it left my hand, turnovers that I made, things that I did poorly on the court, all my attention was going to that. So what do you think I got more of? Of course I got more of that. Whereas these more successful athletes, where they were putting their attention was very different. And I can remember coaches telling me, I can remember my coaches at UVA trying to help me that season, because it was a train wreck. It was pretty much a disaster where I was going mentally that year. And I can remember them trying to help me, but they didn't really know how to help me. But the one thing that they kept saying to me was, well, Dina, your problem is you just think too much. You just think too much. Just go play. Because I was a really good student and I made good grades, and I was a thinking, analytical point guard. I spent a lot of time thinking about how can I get better, how can we get better. And so the only thing they would say to me is, well, Dina, you just think too much. But the problem wasn't that I was thinking too much. The problem was what I was thinking about. That was what was getting me into trouble. If all those thoughts and all that attention about basketball was going on positive things, things that felt good to me, I think I would have had a very different outcome. And eventually I did. But that sophomore year, all my attention was going towards the bad stuff, to the negative stuff.